From Doon with Death is a detective novel, the first in the Wexford series by Ruth Rendell, and was published in 1964. When I read it, I found it to be diametrically opposed to JK Rowling's The Ink Black Heart. The difference in the reading experiences was night and day, and so I thought I would do a little video to talk about some of the things I enjoyed about reading Rendell's first work. Because I did enjoy it thoroughly. Reading it in the evening over 3 days, I was stunned by its sharpness. Compared to Rowling's latest work, at the time of this recording, where whole chapters could have been omitted, it would have been extremely difficult to do the same thing with Rendell. Her efficiency is so effective that it has given me a new appreciation for the kind of sharp, dense prose that makes for some of the best detective works. Somehow Rendell manages to build a transparent case, where the reader can follow along, while still blending scene and summary in such a way that curtails unnecessary procedural work that Wexford and Burton are doing, with the kinds of scenes that have just enough build-up and resolution that the reader needs. There have been few times where a writer has predicted many of the thoughts a reader has as they uncover new information, yet Rendell seems to do so with a dark and insipid style that is frankly addicting. From Doon with Death is about the pastoral murder of Mrs. Parsons, an unassuming housewife who is childless and poor. Very little of her life would have the kinds of burrs or snags that would be the basis of murder, at least at first. When she is found literally off the beaten path, strangled, it is up to Wexford and Burton to not only figure out Mrs. Parsons' past, if there is any, but also to align that with the kind of person who would find murder to such a boring person necessary. Probably the biggest aspect I noticed about Rendell's writing, besides her style, is the way she simultaneously treats people with contempt and respect. The reader ends up liking no one in the novel, as Wexford and Burton manage to catch each suspect during inopportune moments that not only sound true for these characters, but make claims for humanity as a whole. Wexford's encounters infuriate the reader as well, as many of them lie, redirect, project, in ways that make me realize just what a firm psychoanalytic understanding of human behavior Rendell has compared to Rowling. In Rowling's case, what appears feels closer to stage performance. Many of the conversations, if they are back and forth, still give off an A camera, B camera of visual presentation. I think what distinguishes Rendell is the way that the written medium is used to its fullest, going in Wexford's mind, over to Burton's mind, and back out. One is hard-pressed to simply visualize because there are also demarcations of personality that are being addressed as well. Rendell dispenses with the world of King's Markham often, instead choosing the power of scene and summary directly related to the case. The result being that, compared to Rowling's latest, you really get the sense that there is proper investigating going on, full of active choices, rather than two characters who simply connect scenes with aha moments. This might seem like a minor detail, but it's kind of everything. I'll give you an example. At one point in the investigation, Wexford and Burton managed to find a rare lipstick near where Mrs. Parsons' body was found. Parsons never bought lipstick of this shade, or perhaps any shade, so the reader can infer that someone was near the crime scene. Wexford and Burton laboriously and systematically look for chemist shops who sell lipstick in general, and this shade in particular, and eventually find that 4 of that shade are hanging around. After tracking down the lipstick owners, it becomes clear that a Helen Missel must have been the one with that particular shade. She was in the right place, at the right time, and bought it from the chemist who used a purple pen to indicate price. We are brought along on the investigation, and are now with Wexford and Burton when they interrogate Mrs. Missel. We know now that either it was a coincidence, or it matters. But it is in the placement of the reader at this stage that empowers and arms the reader to pay close attention to who Mrs. Missel is and why she matters. I don't really remember this sort of procedural work going on at all in the 1,024 pages of Ink Black Heart. What is even more impressive is that this is only a single piece of evidence. Along the way, we learn about expensive books addressed to Mrs. Parsons by a pseudonym called Doon, addressing Parsons as Mina. We also realize that she might have been strangled by a pink scarf, that she sent letters to her cousin which point to who Doon might be, and that this person may have driven along a country road with specific mud on their tires. All of these are addressed in an amazing conclusion. Some turn out to matter, others not so much. But along the way, I was able to make predictions about the killer. One that was correct, one that was wrong, but both based on the information I had at different points in the case. For Rowling's work, making predictions at all is difficult, because she writes in such a way that gives her quite a bit of the power. Rendell, though she is fiercely critical towards humanity, is still giving and democratic to her reader. Wexford and Burden, when they discuss the case, often do so in order to cut off other avenues, so as to stay focused on the case proper, or to propel the case into a new phase. There's hardly a discussion of psychology without them being tethered to the facts. I think it's clear that Wexford and Burden cannot maintain a personality themselves over the course of 215 pages that cut like a knife, but there are slight moments that add just a little personality. What I found strange is the similarities of Wexford to Strike in even these small moments. Wexford is brusque, aggressive, has a short temper, but is also orderly. Rather than beer, Wexford is fond of tea. He hates light when it diminishes the air conditioning, and seems to have a sense of decorum, even going so far as to offer a suspect tea. This is not Mexico, he says twice in the novel, indicating that even in the worst moments, there must be composure, order, and tradition. Rowling Strike, having come from a slapdash childhood full of artists and groupies, grows up admiring this similar aspect of decorum. The reason I bring this up is that I find little that Rowling's massive page count adds to this comparison between the characters. Burden and Robin play the foils to Wexford and Strike in similar ways as well. If I had to choose between reading these two books, knowing what I know now, From Doon with Death is easily the better choice. Oftentimes there were words that Rendell used that I had to look up. One of the decisions that Rendell made when creating efficiency was to make the work more dense. Compared to Rowling's work, which flows like water, Rendell's work is a lot uglier. When I was reading it out loud, I kept hitching, making mistakes, having words caught in my mouth as other words were trying to make way and get out. It is a thick book, is what I'm saying. Compared to the breezy fiction of Rowling, you do have to pay attention. This is the stuff of writing, and writing only. There's been a tendency in fiction to turn the purpose of writing into a visual medium, one without ambiguity or description that would be easily transferable to the big screen. The linkages of detail, the reciprocity of evidence. Even though I can see there have been adaptations of Rendell's work, I have a feeling that this would be a very difficult thing to achieve while still maintaining the power of her writing. Whereas other authors like Agatha Christie have stories that are begging to be adapted, where big actors get to play in cloistered settings and melodrama ensues in lavish interiors, From Doon with Death has a firm grasp on the nonverbal, the subtlety, that I just do not see happening visually. Were I to film this work, I would try my best to really make the picture a textured experience, zooming in closely to evidence, faces, and with edits that tried to replicate what she is doing with her writing as connective tissue. Very few moments of the case would be done in wide shot with exteriors, save for the moments when we need to see the bleakness of everyday living. Easy examples include the Quadrant Manor, which is green and gray, and very little else. Compared with Ink Black Heart, I don't know how else to say this, but there was quite a bit of restaurant porn, where the characters Strike and Robin needed to end up someplace to talk, and so you end up getting inundated with descriptions of places and food and seating arrangements. It felt as if the case was patched together with masking tape, hobbling along so that other scenes could be given their time. And I think it goes to show that a mystery that points closer to the 1,000-page mark brings themselves further challenges. This is not necessarily the case with other genres. Fantasy and science fiction lend themselves to long installments because the world needs explaining, because it has an effect on character decisions. Many longer pieces of literature earn themselves a space by addressing larger ideas. A case can be difficult to place a larger idea on, though it is not impossible. To bring it all back, though I think From Doon with Death has a dated feel, I think it does so many things right that either we have forgotten or that lies dormant. Quality writing comes from intense brevity, where the thoughts of the author are distilled so violently that the reader cannot help but learn something of the human condition in the act. This has basically been a video encouraging you to give Rendell a try. It was enough for me as a first outing to read more of her works, especially some of her standalone novels, which explore this psychology a little more. As to me, her coherence and her attention towards it was my favorite part of the novel. Thanks again for listening.